President Cyril Ramaphosa has joined his fellow African heads of state for an annual summit on the African Union in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, starting today. Now, the effects of climate change on the continent, as well as violence in Senegal, are amongst the issues that will top the agenda of the two-day summit. Dr. Alexander Rusero, international relations analyst, joins us via video link to unpack further. Dr. Alex, good afternoon. Welcome to the SABC and thank you for joining us at this hour.
Sure, thank you for having me once again.
Dr. Alex, we're looking at the 37th AU Heads of State and Government Summit that's taking place. Those in attendance, as well as what's set to top the agenda. I mean, we've alluded to it, Senegal, a climate change. What are your expectations?
Yeah, my expectations is that there is a lot at stake which warrants more than mere talk shows at these kind of summits, because Africa is reeling under a lot of social, economic, political, cultural and technological problems. So you look at what is taking place in Senegal. It's an early warning which needs some mitigatory intervention. But more importantly, you also look at what has taken place in the DRC, in the eastern region of the DRC, where a whole plane has been downed by the M23 rebels, the United Nations Organization mission for the stabilization of the DRC. You have some skirmishes that are boiling there. Then you also have the unending issues in West Africa. So all these, they warrant intervention at the highest level of the African Union by way of heads of states converging and mapping ways of nipping the continental problems in the bud, as opposed to maybe waiting for such salvation coming from outside the continent, as has become customary in most of the issues bedeviling Africa.
Well, speaking of which, we're looking at the continental problems, management thereof, and how we're faring on that front. I'm bringing this into the fore because I want to then also look at the role of Africa that it's playing in conflict resolution globally, given the dynamics unfolding ahead of the peace summit as well, the diplomatic mission sent to help be part of the crisis management and resolution as well. What comes to the fore?
Yeah, what comes to the fore is the revitalization of Africa's agency in international relations and diplomacy. Because for the umpteenth time, Africa's agency was on the periphery. Africa was considered a non-entity in as much as issues to do with global governance, international affairs and diplomacy at a planetary scale, at a global scale is concerned. But when you have the recent historic victory as symbolized by South Africa dragging Israel before the ICJ and Israel suffering a heavy defeat, it shows you that maybe this is rekindling of the Africa's agency, the great grand scheme of Africa, which the founding fathers were dreaming about, that Africa is no longer that kind of the continent which used to be stereotyped as having no agency or impact. So all this must be galvanized by way of demonstrating that what we are doing as a continent in the international system must firstly be harnessed at a local, at a domestic, at a unitary level.
Well, speaking of
Yes.
which, I'm bringing peace and security and domestic affairs as well as continental affairs to the fore because, there's obviously development and trade agreements that also need to be taken into consideration. Its efficacy as well, if that cannot be secured. And the AFCFTA comes to the fore. We know also this time at the 37th AU Heads of State, the launch of the second 10-year implementation plan of the AU's Agenda 2063 is also set to be unpacked. And I mean, this is obviously going to be affected given those dynamics. What are you observing on that front?
Yes, there is no trade that flourishes when a continent is simmering in conflicts, is immersed with conflict at that proportional scale.
Yes.
But what is more important is to take stock at what is happening. What is it that is being put in place? As we are speaking, you may recall that the Africa Capacity Building Foundation, ACBF, which is an institution, an extension of the African Union, is also having a training capacity session on the sidelines, training diplomats on the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, the AfCFTA. But we must come to terms to reality that trade can only flourish when issues of peace are resolved. But peace does not only necessarily mean the absence of war or the silencing of the gun. A lot still needs to be done at state level in as much as human security is concerned. Yes, governments might be preoccupied by these issues of traditional peace, insurgencies, rebels, but a lot of citizens in Africa are not happy. There is not much investment in terms of human security at a continental level, and this is something that the heads of states should reconsider. Hence, if you look at the theme for this year, which is focusing on education,
yes,
which is focusing on how Africa should also rise up to its educational fundamentals to the dictates of the 21st century, this probably could also feed in the issues of satisfaction of human prosperity and issues of human security. But the problem now is, for most of the time, even our education architecture infrastructure, we rely much on the exogenous kind of donations, exogenous kind of handouts, even to harness our education. So for as long as we do not have homegrown and sacrosanct solutions to all the problems and all the themes that we want to fulfill, we will continue in this kind of merry-go-round, because human security in Africa.
Yes, because that actually brings me to my closing point about the metrics used for development on the continent, and also just whether we need more Afrocentric approaches in measuring that. And I think you have touched on that, just given some of the ideologies and hegemonic sentiments coming through. So thank you very much. I'm going to leave it there for now. Thank you for joining us on the SABC at this hour. We're obviously going to continue to monitor the developments. Dr. Alex Rusero is an international relations analyst weighing in on the 37th AU Heads of State and Government Summit. It's taking place in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.